All units attempt to locate a suspect involved in possible kidnapping.
Watch closely. The man in the Deadpool costume strolls through a college campus parking lot in broad daylight. But he isn't just a regular guy. For 2 weeks, he had been stalking 21-year-old Lauren McCluskey. And on October 22, 2018, she vanished without a trace. But her story doesn't end there. Listen closely, because her voice was silenced, but her story demands to be told.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I was just 21 years old when my life was ripped away. I had everything ahead of me, dreams to chase, races to win, a future to build. But in a moment, it was all taken away by someone who said he loved me. I had worked so hard to get to where I was, running track for the University of Utah, excelling in my studies, making my family proud. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't the kind of person who took risks. But none of that protected me, because the man who said he loved me was the one who ended my life. I never thought I would be a cautionary tale. I never imagined that my name would be spoken in courtrooms, on news broadcasts, in tearful interviews with my parents. I was supposed to graduate, to build a career, to run, to love, to live. But my life wasn't mine to keep. It was stolen from me in a parking lot, on a cold October night, by a man who wouldn't let go. A man I should never have met. If I had known who he really was, I never would have answered that first message. I never would have smiled at him, or let him into my life, or believed the lies he so effortlessly spun. But I didn't know. I had no way of knowing, and by the time I realized the truth, it was already too late. He wasn't the person he claimed to be. Not even close. He told me he was 28 years old, confident, successful, looking for something real. The reality was much darker. He was 37, a convicted sex offender, a man with a past so terrifying that I still can't believe he was allowed to be free, walking among people like me, people who had no idea what he had done, what he was capable of. It started the way these things always do, innocently. I had been busy balancing school and track, not thinking much about dating. When I met him through a dating app, he seemed safe, normal, attentive even. He asked questions about my running, about my goals, about my family. He made me feel special, and in those early weeks, I let my guard down. We would go out, grab dinner, spend time together. He was sweet, thoughtful. I had no reason to doubt him. He told me about his job, his ambitions. He painted a picture of a man who had his life together, who knew what he wanted, and I believed him. But looking back, I see it now. The small moments that should have made me pause, the times he avoided answering simple questions, the times he changed the subject when I asked about his past, the way he never wanted me to see where he lived. I brushed those things aside, assuming he just needed time to open up. I told myself that no one is perfect, that people have their reasons for being guarded. Then, one night, everything changed. I was sitting in my dorm room when I got a call from a close friend. Her voice was uneasy. She told me she had looked him up, that something wasn't right, that I needed to listen. And then she said it. His real name, his real age, his criminal history. My hands shook as I typed his name. And then, the screen filled with mugshots, police records, news reports. The words blurred as my eyes locked onto one sentence: convicted sex offender. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My stomach twisted, my chest tightened, my world shattered in an instant. Everything he had told me was a lie. The man I had been seeing wasn't just someone with a past. He was dangerous. He had spent nearly a decade in prison for sex crimes. He was a predator, a manipulator, and he had been lying to me from the very start. I felt sick. I confronted him immediately. I told him I knew everything. I told him it was over. He didn't argue. He didn't try to deny it. He just accepted it, told me he understood, that he was sorry, that he wished me the best. I blocked his number, deleted his messages, tried to erase him from my life. But he wasn't finished with me. Not even close. At first, I thought I was free. I had confronted him, ended things, and blocked every possible way he could reach me. I told myself that was enough. That I had caught the lie in time. That I had protected myself before anything worse could happen. But I was wrong. The first time I saw him outside my dorm, I told myself it was a coincidence. The second time, I felt uneasy. By the third time, I knew. He wasn't done with me. At first, it was subtle. I would leave class and feel eyes on me. I would turn a corner and catch a glimpse of a familiar figure disappearing just out of sight. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from unknown numbers. I knew it was him. Then the threats started. He told me I had ruined his life, that I owed him for what I had done, that he had pictures of me, private pictures, and that he would send them to my friends, my family, my coaches, unless I paid him, unless I answered his calls. I had never felt fear like that before. It wasn't just the thought of my reputation being destroyed. It was the realization that he still had power over me. That no matter how much distance I tried to put between us, he would find a way back in. I told the police. I did everything I was supposed to do. I reported the blackmail, the stalking. I handed over the messages, the call logs. But nothing happened. They told me they would look into it. That was it. I started carrying my keys between my fingers when I walked home at night. I kept my dorm door locked even when I was inside. Every noise in the hallway made my heart pound. I was constantly checking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. I was living inside a nightmare, and no one seemed to care. The last week of my life, I barely slept. I kept my phone on my nightstand, checking it every few minutes, making sure my parents knew where I was at all times. I told my mom everything. I told her I was scared. She told me she believed me, that we would figure it out, that it would be okay. I wanted to believe her. On October 22nd, 2018, the day started like any other. I went to class. I trained with my team. I texted my mom, telling her I loved her, telling her I'd call her later. I had no idea it would be the last time I ever spoke to her. 8 p.m. The air was cold, the sky dark. I walked the same path I had walked 100 times before, my backpack heavy against my shoulder. But something was different. The streetlights felt dimmer. The night felt quieter. And then I saw him. I looked up. He was there, standing by my building, waiting. My stomach twisted into knots. My hands started shaking. I didn't know what to do. I called my mom. My voice was shaking when I told her. He's here. She told me to get help, to go inside, to stay on the phone with her. But I didn't have time. He was already walking toward me. Before I could run, before I could even think, he grabbed me. I remember the feeling of his hand tightening around my arm, the way my pulse pounded in my ears. I screamed. He pulled out a gun. I begged him to stop. He didn't. There was a flash, a deafening sound, a searing pain in my chest. The ground rushed up to meet me, the cold pavement against my skin. My phone was still in my hand. My mother's voice, pleading, desperate, was still on the other end. But I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. The pain faded. The world faded. And then, it all became dark. I lay there, my body motionless against the pavement, the life draining from me as the night closed in. My phone, still connected to my mother, was the only proof that I had been there just moments before. Alive, breathing, full of hope. She heard everything, the scream, the gunshot, the silence. But he didn't stay to watch me die. He didn't kneel down to see if I was still breathing. He didn't hesitate. He turned and walked away like nothing had happened. Like I was just another problem he had solved. And then, while my mother was still on the line, still pleading for me to answer, he ran. But he didn't run in fear. He didn't hide in panic. No, he was calm, calculated. He had been planning this for too long to be reckless now. He got into his car, drove off like he was just another man heading home after a long day. He didn't look back. Not once. As my blood pooled beneath me, soaking into the pavement, his life carried on like nothing had changed. He went on a date. Yes, a date. Less than an hour after pulling the trigger, after listening to me beg for my life, he walked into a bar, sat across from another woman, smiled, laughed, flirted. He ordered drinks. He pretended to be normal. The same way he had done with me. The same way he had done with so many before me. He knew the police would be coming soon. He knew my body would be found. He knew there would be no way out this time. So he enjoyed his last night of freedom like it was just another evening. Meanwhile, my mother, my father, my teammates, my friends, all of them were making frantic calls, desperate to find me, desperate to change the outcome. But there was no changing it. My body was discovered near the dorm building. Officers swarmed the scene. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched across the sidewalk, flashing red and blue lights painting the night. The world around me moved on, but I did not. The investigation moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. The phone calls, the messages, the police reports that had been ignored for weeks. There was no doubt about who had done this. They tracked his car. They followed his movements. They knew where he was. And then, finally, the hunt for him was over. But he wasn't going to prison. He wasn't going to stand trial. He wasn't going to face my family, look my parents in the eye, hear their grief, their rage, because he had made his choice. As the police closed in, surrounding him in an apartment complex hours later, he knew there was no escape. He pulled out his gun, the same gun he had used on me, and this time he turned it on himself. A single shot. He took the coward's way out. There would be no courtroom, no sentencing, no justice, just more silence. But my name wouldn't be erased. My story wouldn't end there. Because my family wouldn't let it. I never got to see what happened next. I never got to hear the sirens, the voices shouting my name, the officers kneeling beside me, checking for a pulse they wouldn't find. I never got to see my mother break down when the police called her, confirming the very thing she had feared the moment the line went silent. I wasn't there when my father collapsed onto his knees, his hands shaking as he struggled to breathe, struggling to process that his daughter was gone. I wasn't there for any of it. But my absence was everywhere. It was in the halls of the university, where my teammates showed up to practice, only to realize that I wouldn't be running beside them ever again. It was in my dorm room, where my bed remained made, my book still open on my desk, waiting for a girl who would never come back to finish her studies. It was in the faces of my friends, who had spent weeks telling me to be careful, who had spent months watching the fear grow in my eyes, who had done everything they could except stop the inevitable. And it was in my family's grief, the kind of grief that doesn't fade, the kind of pain that settles in your bones and never leaves. There was no trial, no courtroom showdown, no justice in the way most people expect. The man who took my life had taken the easy way out, leaving behind nothing but a mess of broken hearts and unanswered questions. He would never have to sit in front of my mother, listening as she demanded to know why. He would never have to see my father struggle to hold himself together long enough to speak my name. He would never have to explain himself, because he had stolen more than just my life. He had stolen their chance for closure. But my family refused to let my story end with a bullet in a parking lot. And they weren't just going to bury me and let the world forget. They were going to fight, not just for me, but for every woman who had ever been ignored, dismissed, brushed aside when she begged for help. They were going to make sure that no other mother would have to listen to her daughter die on the other end of a phone call, powerless to do anything but scream into the silence. And so they did. They exposed the failures, the missed chances, the warnings that had been ignored, the system that had failed to protect me, the authorities that had waved away my fears, the red flags that had been so bright, so obvious and yet somehow invisible to the people who should have stopped this from happening. They pushed for stronger protections for stalking victims. They demanded changes. And because of them, because of their voices, because of the voices of every woman who had ever lived in fear of a man who wouldn't let go, the laws began to shift. But laws don't bring me back. They don't erase the final moments of my life. They don't soften the screams that still haunt my mother's dreams. They don't change the fact that I was 21 years old, that I was a student, an athlete, a daughter, a friend, and now I am a story. A story that should have ended differently. A story that shouldn't have ended at all. And that's why you need to hear it. Because this isn't just my story. This is the story of too many women. The ones who saw the signs but weren't believed. The ones who begged for help and were met with indifference. The ones who stayed silent because they thought no one would care. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore the fear in your gut. Don't let anyone tell you that you're overreacting. And if someone you love tells you they're scared, listen. Because I did everything right. And still I ended up here. I was Lauren McCluskey. And I should still be here.